In this video, I'm going to show you how to build your next gaming PC, your next workstation PC, your next video and photo editing PC, your all-around internet web browsing PC. So in this video, I'm going to show you how to build utilizing the Aorus X570S Master Gaming Motherboard along with the AMD Ryzen 9 5900X processor. Cooling this big bad boy is the Arctic Liquid Freezer 2 240 A-RGB liquid cooling unit. The graphics are going to be brought to you by the EVGA Geforce RTX 3080 Ti FTW3 Ultra Gaming Graphics card. Over here, we're going to be utilizing 16 gigs of Thermaltake Tough RAM 4000 MHz RGB RAM, along with the Sabrent Rocket 4 plus 1 TB M.2 SSD and the Western Digital Blue 500 gig SSD, powered by the EVGA Supernova 1000G power supply. All of this is going to be housed inside of the Montech Air 1000 Lite case. So without wasting any more time, let's get started on the build. Before you start your build, go ahead and touch an inside part of the case so that you can discharge all the ESD. The last thing you want to do is zap a component. One of the first things we're going to want to do is install the CPU. These pins are incredibly easy to damage. One slight mistouch and you could be trying real hard to unbend those pins, and that's kind of difficult sometimes. So first thing we're going to do is we're going to raise this arm right over here, locking the CPU socket in place. So to do that, we're going to push down on the arm and slide out. Then we're going to just raise it. Raising the arm is going to go ahead and unlock the CPU. So now you'll notice right over here on the top left hand corner, depending on how you're looking at the motherboard, there is a little indicator to let you know where the gold corner on the CPU is going to go. The gold corner on the CPU is right over here. You're going to notice how that corner is different than every other regular corner. So we're just going to go ahead and align that corner with this corner and then just drop the CPU right in place. Now you don't need to push down. It will literally fall right in place if it's correct. If you need to push down, I highly recommend raising the CPU, moving a little bit till it perfectly falls in that socket. Afterwards, we're going to go ahead and push this arm down and just push it down, angle it slightly to the right, and that'll go ahead and lock right under this retention mechanism right over here. So now we've just installed the AMD Ryzen 9 5900X processor. So next we're going to go ahead and install on the CPU the Arctic Freezer 2 240 A-RGB liquid cooling unit. Now this is Rev 1. Check your UPC to see if you're using Rev 1, Rev 2 or newer, and I'll have links to everything down in the description below. So first off, we're going to be removing these plastic pieces right over here. They're used to hold down the fans for the CPU. I highly recommend after you remove them, save them somewhere in the motherboard box or somewhere for safekeeping, just in case you want to use a different solution at some point later on. At this point, don't lift your motherboard. If you do, the backplate for the CPU is going to come loose. Mind you, you can always put it back, but just to make it easier, these 4 little screw holes are what we're going to be using now. So over each of those holes, we're going to be placing these plastic caps over them. So we're going to be using these little mounts that come with the Arctic. Depending on what processor you have, you're going to be using different mounts and then also different screw holes. Since we're using the 5000 series, the screws are going to be screwed in at these top screw holes. And so we're just going to lay it down right on top of these pegs right over here, and it'll be more important in a second. Now we're going to be utilizing 4 of these screws, and again, using the top screw hole, just drop it right in there and then drop it right in here, and then we'll screw it in kind of as a pilot, and it might take a minute to get it perfectly in that hole. which is why I'm using my fingertips at first as to not damage the motherboard. So now it's in there. We'll just push down here so that we can put that plastic cap back over the hole. And then now we'll go ahead and put in another screw again on the topmost hole, which is a little easier the second time around, being that we already have this one screwed in. And then again, because we're using the 5000 series, now notice how the little circle was over here. Now the little circle is going to be facing the CPU on this side as well. And we're going to be utilizing still that second hole. This time it's going to be closest to the CPU, while this one was furthest away from the CPU. Now that we have that in, we'll just go ahead and tighten it with a screwdriver. And then I'm gonna go ahead and go diagonally across, because while they are two separate pieces, the backplane for the CPU is one entire piece. So you notice when I was moving this one, these were moving as well. So just to make sure that everything is situated properly. Okay, and then now I'll go over here. We're going to be grabbing these little plates right over here, and we're going to flip them over. Notice how there's lips facing upwards here, kind of forming like a cup. You're going to be putting it like that, up just like that. And we're going to be doing that to both sides. The cables are going to go over that little mechanism, and we're going to be using these screws that come inside of the baggie. During this installation, I used this screw to screw that little tray in, when I should have actually used this longer screw with the little cap head right over here to compare them so that you can tell the difference, because it's not that easy to tell the difference. Just so that helps you. So we're going to be putting that screw right in here, just kind of threading it in there. A few little twists. And then now we're going to be screwing it into this hole right here, and then one right over here. So we're going to drop it in just like that. Nice and tight. And we're going to do the same on the other side. So the package brings Arctic MX5 thermal paste. The way I do it is I apply about a pea size right in the center of the CPU. Everybody has their own method. That's the way I do it. Take it as you will. So now we're going to go ahead and remove this. A lot of people leave it on. Don't worry if you do. It's a common mistake. It's not going to kill your CPU, but things are going to get a lot hotter if you don't remove it. So just peel that off. Now this is depending on your case, but the way I found it'll be situated the best is with the fan facing up. You'd have to lay it in your case in order to see which way the hoses are going to be less kinked. So holding the cables just like that, I'm gonna go ahead and drop it in here. So you'll notice there are little pegs right over here, 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 and here. These are going to fall right into these holes on the liquid cooling unit pump. So we're just going to go ahead and drop that right into place. Then we're going to be using these nuts to screw in all four corners. Now make sure, the way I recommend to do it, so that it gets applied properly is do it diagonally. One over here, then one over here, then one over here, and one over here. So just apply it right now as a pilot so that way it doesn't move around too much. So I have one here, and they are barely screwed in right now again as a pilot. And it might have been better if I moved the cable from here to over here, maybe to get things out of the way, but that's okay. Okay, now I'm going to be screwing in this corner down first. And then right over here, up at this corner. Then over here. And over here. Just come back around, make sure everything's nice and tight. And mind you, we'll get more into this on the cabling portion of the video, but the 4-pin PWM connection would either go into a pump header or the CPU fan header. We can see right over here, there is a pump header. So what I'll do is I'll connect that here. And then there is an A-RGB connection as well, which is going to go in any A-RGB connection. Just for this video, I'll go ahead and put it here. But I will, of course, make it look nicer in the wiring portion of the next video. So now we're going to go ahead and install the RAM. For the RAM, you can't just install it in slot 1 and 2. And these actually aren't 1, 2, 3, 4. This is A1, A2, B1, and B2. When you have 2 sticks of RAM, you're going to install the RAM as A2 and B2. And when you have 4 sticks, obviously you're going to install them all like this. So we're going to go ahead and install it on A2 and B2. So what I did is just open this up so that we can actually install RAM. A little bit closer is we just pull it out like that. And now we're gonna go ahead and install 1 stick of RAM. So kind of putting it in like a little sled system. Now you notice it didn't fit like that. That's because there's a notch right over here. And then there's a notch right over here in the RAM. So the way we had it just like this, see how it falls right outside of that notch? So now we'll just turn the RAM around and just push down. That locks over here and that locks right over here. So you can actually lift the board from the RAM. Not that you want to do that, but you could. So again, matching up that little slot. All right, so now we've just installed 16 gigs of RAM. So let's go ahead and install an M.2 SSD. All right, so just above the first PCIe slot, we'll find the Thermal Guard 3 plate. We're going to go ahead and unscrew the screw here. And then we'll unscrew the screw right over here. Then we can just lift this out of its slot. Removing that tray reveals the M.2 socket right over here. Also, you'll notice there's kind of what seems like a piece of blue tape. So we're gonna go ahead and remove that. Carefully remove it, as there is a thermal pad underneath of that. You don't want to remove that thermal pad while you're removing the film. We're going to go ahead and match the little notch right over here with the little notch right over here. Then we're going to go ahead and slide that M.2 right into place. You may hear a little click letting you know it's in place. Just make sure it's tight in there so that the motherboard and of course the OS can install on it. Then we're going to go ahead and lay it down. Because of that thermal pad, it's going to go ahead and keep itself laid down. But then we'll grab that M.2 screw that came inside of the motherboard box and we'll place that right in here and just screw that in. And now you've just installed an M.2 SSD. We could always put this right back in there, but I'm gonna keep it off just for the installation video, and I'll go ahead and put that back during the cabling portion of this video. So let's go ahead and put the motherboard inside of the case. So now with the case laying down, I've removed all the panels just to keep from things getting scratched. This is the bottom of the case. This is the top of the case. And this is the rear of the case. This is the front, just to get you a little situated as to what we're looking at right now. Notice here, 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 and here. I know you can't see these right over here, but that's okay. Are motherboard screws. Right now they're in the ATX fashion. Now there is one screw right over here, or one standoff I should say, right over here that's not screwed in. There isn't one. It comes inside the case accessories. If your motherboard has a screw there, you're gonna go ahead and put a standoff there. Though this particular motherboard does not have a screw there, or a screw hole. So we're just gonna go ahead and place the motherboard right in the case for right now. Nothing 100% perfect just yet. And we're just gonna go ahead and first align the rear IO. Since the case already has the IO shield in place, it's perfect. It allows it to line up perfectly. Now that we have this perfect, we can better gauge that we have all these other screw holes aligned properly. And then once we do, we're going to go ahead and use the motherboard SSD screws that came with the case. Okay, so we'll go ahead and put this one in first. Just line it up. Don't screw it down 100% just yet. And then we'll do one right over here on the very corner. And then we'll do one right over here diagonally. Normally I would have done the middle one first, but since there is a shroud over it, it's a little bit harder to see right now. So now that we have one right in the corner over here, on the side over here, and diagonally right over there, all the other 6 screw holes should be perfectly centered. And then we'll go ahead and screw them in all nice and tight. So now we're ready to install the radiator for the liquid cooling unit. We're at a little bit of a disadvantage though, because right over here, you're going to notice both 8-pin EPS CPU power connections, then all of these different PWM fan headers right at the very top. When you put that radiator, you won't be able to get to any of these. So what we're going to go ahead and do, even though this is not the cabling portion of the video, I'll refer to this video inside of the cabling video. We're going to go ahead and just connect these cables so that way it makes our lives a little bit easier for the cabling portion. At the very top of the case, this is the back, this is the top of the case. On the motherboard, you'll notice there's 2 EPS CPU power connections. If you're not going to be overclocking, or you're going to be overclocking only a little bit, you only need one of the 2. Now, if you're going to be overclocking moderately high or extremely high, you're going to need both. Regardless, if you have 2 8-pin EPS connections on your power supply, it's not going to hurt if you connect them both. So I'm going to connect them both. Now, because I'm using a modular power supply, I don't have the cable connected to the power supply, so I can show you a little bit easier. Just sliding them in right now. We're going to go ahead and connect those 2 8-pins. It's almost impossible for me to show you, unfortunately, because it is such a tight connection. So we have one connected there. So basically, you just join. This is a 2+4 connection. So we'll go ahead, or a 4+2, whatever you want to call it. And then you just join them both and then connect them right into place. And they kind of click in place so you know when they're in there solid. Okay, so that's connected. Now on the fan pump, there is a 4-pin PWM connection. That way you can regulate how fast this and the fans on the radiator spins. We're going to want that to connect that on the pump. You'll notice this 4th one, or however you're counting, the first one says sys pump. So we'll just go ahead and connect that cable, slide that in, and we are connected. Now we're also going to connect the A-RGB connection, 3-pin, right over here. Okay, so now we can go ahead and drop in the radiator. Right into place over here. So at the very top, you're going to notice the EPS connection right over here. It's a little bit tight, but because of the way Montech has moved this up and then moved it up even more so that you have more room to move around your liquid cooling radiator, they've given you plenty of space on here. Then you'll just match up the screw holes right over here to make sure you have all 8 of them. So there's going to be right over here. After you've got them matched up, for this you're going to be using this screw right over here, and it kind of has like a rounded off head. These screws come with the liquid cooling unit, and this washer, just go ahead, slide that through the washer. Now lighting it up again so you see all 8 screw holes. We'll go ahead, put screw 1 in slightly just so that we have that pilot screw in place. 1 over here, and then diagonally 1 over here. So now that we have this one and this one in place, that aligns everything else up perfectly. So at this point is the point that I realized that I used the wrong screws. So I had to go back and get the right screws. So crisis averted. Hopefully my mistake helped you. So at this point we have the liquid cooling radiator installed, as well as the pump, the motherboard, the M.2 SSD, and the RAM all installed. So now we're going to go ahead and install the video card. The video card is going to go right in this very first PCIe slot. So on this case, we're going to go ahead and need to release what holds the PCIe slots down. We're going to remove these 2 PCIe slots, so the second and the third. So just slide it through the little hole right in there. And do the same for the third. Okay, so now that we have the 2 PCIe covers removed and the PCIe slot right over here, we're going to want to go ahead and unlock this locking mechanism here. Now there's a chance that when you're sliding in that video card, it's going to unlock and then lock as the little locking mechanism on the card itself slides in and then grips onto this. But it's always best to just unlock it first. Then we're going to go ahead and match up these PCIe fingers with the slot right over here. Then notice that little notch right here. And because of the way that this is situated on the case, you want to make sure that this is opened as much as possible so that you can actually fit the card in. And then go ahead and push that in. You'll notice that little locking mechanism lock in place. If you notice, it went click, lock the card right in place. So then now we can come over here, slide this in a locked position. Then we can go ahead, screw the video card in. And the second screw as well. And now we can go and lock these down. Okay, now that we have that video card installed, we can come around the back and we can install the SSDs right along here. Now you could choose whichever slot you'd like. I'm gonna go ahead and put it right along the front over here. That way I can drop down the cables from over here, and slide them a little bit better to hide. So all we do is come over here and unscrew this thumb screw. Remove this tray. So we have to open it up and then pull it out. We're then going to go ahead and line up the SSD right over here, right along the back of the tray. So we'll line up the 4 screw holes, and we'll go ahead and use the same screws that we used for the motherboard. And I'm just going to go ahead and slide one in as a pilot hole. Okay, so now we can go ahead and screw in all 4 of those. With that SSD installed, we'll go ahead and put these little feet right back into their slots. And then it's like a door. We'll grab that thumb screw. And that's it. So now we'll just have to connect power to this, and then from the SATA port to the SATA port on the motherboard. So some mistakes were made along the way. I showed you the mistakes and then how I fixed them, but yeah, it kind of comes with the territory of being human. So as we finish the video, the system is fully built minus the power supply. The power supply I kind of consider to be, even the hardware, part of the cabling portion, since there are so many cables, -2. -2 because in the video you noticed I installed the 2 EPS 8-pin CPU powers. Because of the radiator, it would have blocked completely the 2 8-pins right up over here. Only way to get to them is without the radiator installed. So during the wiring portion of the video coming up next, I'll walk you through that portion as well. So the build is relatively easy. The most difficult part was the liquid cooling. The instructions weren't that great, but like you, I followed along the instructions to get everything installed. A little bit different than the last liquid cooling 420 I installed, this being the 240. I chose the 240 so that I could have it along the top of this case. Now I could have chosen the 280 and installed it along the front of the case, or even the 360 if I remember correctly, but I wanted to keep it at the top of the case so nobody cries about it. But as it is right now, she looks beautiful. Again, it is going to look beautiful on the hardware portion, but in the very next video, I'm going to show you how to install every single cable and where every single cable goes to and from, so that you completely understand not only how to build it and how to cable it, but what every single cable does and why it does it. Well, that's about it for now. Again, this is Iggy with ThisBytesForYou, showing you how to build an entire system inside of the Montech Air 1000 Lite. Iggy out. See you guys.